Well, hello, everyone. I want to welcome you to another episode of Unstoppable Mindset. I am your host, Mike Hingson. And our guest today is David Price, who is, by any standard, a visionary CEO. He formed the Price Group IMO. And I asked him what IMO stood for, and he's going to tell us that, among other things, as we go forward today. But he's got a great story to tell, and I'm absolutely certain he's got a lot of interesting kinds of lessons and observations that we all can use. So, without further ado, as it were, David, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. We're glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for the great intro and definitely an honor to be on a podcast with you, man. Really appreciate that.
Well, I'm glad that you were able to make it and you have the time to do it. So you live in Puerto Rico now these days.
Yes, Puerto Rico is my home. Been here a little bit over 2 years and enjoy the weather and the fresh air and everything that comes with it.
As we were just talking about that, you had mentioned after checking, it can get down into the 60s and 70s. Um, I know out here in Victorville in the winter, we can get down into the teens and below. So, oh well, I stay in the house and can keep the house warm if we need to or not. Our home is almost 9 years old. So it's really pretty recent, pretty new, great insulation and solar and everything else. So the bottom line is that we stay comfortable in the house. Although I wouldn't mind being in a place where it doesn't get below 60 at night. But,
Yeah,
oh well.
definitely enjoy it. I'm from New Jersey, so definitely don't miss the cold. Matter of fact, growing up, I remember we had oil heat where you had to put,
Mm.
you had a big tank and you had to fill the tank with oil. And I remember there's, some winters where we ran out of it and my mom didn't have money to get new oil, put more oil and definitely didn't have the heat in the winter for short periods of time and stuff like that. So don't miss that at all.
I lived in a town in Massachusetts where our home was heated by oil for a while. And there were a few times that it was actually a rental. And the owner also had his home attached. But the bottom line is we did run out of oil a couple times and we coped with it, but still, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. So here we have gas heat and that seems to be working pretty well. I'm 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 not sure whether we would have been better off if we had just gone all electric and have more solar panels on the house, but it works okay. So we keep decent temperatures. Well, so let's start. Tell us a little bit about you growing up, what life was like and all that. Where did you live in New Jersey?
Yeah, so I lived in, man, probably about 20 places by the time I was in high school in New Jersey. I grew up to drug addicted parents. Um, they got divorced before I could remember, and my mom had me when she was 18. So it's really two drug addicted kids. And lived in homeless shelters, the projects, uh, you know, whatever we could do. I mean, hotels and stuff like that. So definitely had a rougher childhood, something that at the time wasn't fun. Now I look at that and I think that helped me develop the mindset and my ability to just handle stress and different things that helps me as an entrepreneur. My mother, she got clean when I was in middle school and life started getting better then, right? Life started getting better and we stopped moving so much. We went to one school for my whole entire high school, which was really cool. That was a big goal of my mom's that she was able to do for us. And I wrestled. I enjoyed that. I wasn't the greatest student. I think wrestling really saved me, gave me some focus, gave me, when you're good at a sport, you get a little bit extra love from the teachers and stuff, I believe. So I think that really helped guide me in the right direction. But that was a little short, brief summary of my childhood.
So did you have addictions for a while? Were you actually addicted?
Yeah, yeah. So, you would think, and in my mind, like, I'm gonna learn from my parents. I'm not gonna make the same mistakes they did. But yeah, eventually, in high school, somebody offered me some drugs, and I said no a bunch of different times, and he's like, "Oh no, you got to try this one," which was ecstasy, actually.
Mm.
And I remember trying that, and like my first thought, and like my addict mind was like, "Oh my God, this was so good. What else am I missing?" And then I just became open-minded to try pretty much anything after that. And I struggled with drug addiction on and off for 20 years. I guess not really on and off. I think you always struggle with it. You just do a better job coping with it. But towards the end of that time, I was pretty functional for the majority of it. But then towards the end, the drug addiction really takes over, and I finally lost everything. Actually, back into a no heat story. So I was in New Jersey. I was staying in a friend's apartment. He abandoned the apartment. He stopped paying rent. He stopped paying the electric. Again, no heat. It was the winter, and he had gas. So I thought it'd be a bright idea to boil some water on the stove, and that would heat up the place. And all it did was, throw mist all over the
Hmm.
everywhere, right? It was just like everything was fogged up. It was like didn't really warm anything up. And finally just like woke up one morning and I was like, what the heck is going on? Like I didn't know what to do. I was like, I need to make a change. And I had a girlfriend at that time, and I woke her up and I was like, hey, listen, we're going to Louisiana. She looked at me like I was crazy. And Louisiana was my father lived there, and I, I didn't have a good relationship with him. I haven't talked to him in years, but I knew he would give me a place to stay, which was actually at my grandma's house on her pull-out couch. And that was like 2012. Didn't magically get clean because I moved to a different area. A lot of times people think you could just move and that changes things, but I was still the same person. Made it a little harder to use not knowing anyone, but I eventually walked into a 12-step meeting in July of 2013, and that was the last time I used. So you know, lot more to that. It wasn't just magically showing up to a meeting, but that was to answer your question. Yes, I struggled with drugs all the way up into 2013.
So you did drugs all the way through college and then beyond.
Yeah, so I did college. I did 2 years online college, and I was actually one class short of a associate's degree at the time. I had a pretty good job, which I thought was my career. 401k, car allowance. I was managing people, and I was always interested in business. So I wanted to go to school for business, and I was also in the army, so I had the GI Bill. So I was using that, and I just got to like the last class I needed. I was like, this at that time my addiction was pretty bad again, and I was just like, man, this isn't even something I'm enjoying doing. If I look at back at it, how I would have done it differently is I was like, oh, let me do all the prerequisites first. So I did 2 years of just like boring stuff that like I wasn't into when I should have at least been taking the business classes and stuff like that first, even though, someone told me you should do prerequisites first in case you want to change your major. But ultimately, I just wanted to learn about business.
Hmm. Now, why did you want to learn about business? What prompted you to decide on that path?
Yeah. So, I remember being about 8 years old and, living with my mom. It was me, and my sister. She's 2 years younger than me. Her name is Jessica. And we're living in the projects in Woodbridge, New Jersey. And my mom was just always out partying. I mean, there's times we came home and the door was locked. It was pouring rain. Didn't know where she was. And it's Christmas. Sometimes we'd have Christmas presents, but it would be because of a church donated it. Like we had enough to survive for sure, but we didn't have much extra. And my grandfather, which was my mom's father, he owned a mechanic shop in Piscataway where he worked on like tractor trailers and heavy equipment. And when I would go to his house, like he had a professional interior decorator, the towels matched, the everything was just like beautiful. Breakfast, you had a real breakfast in the morning, you had lunch, you had a real dinner, everyone sat down. And I was like, oh, okay, so this is it. Like it's, welfare, government assistance, or there's the opportunity to be a business owner. This is what life looks like. So those were really only two examples I had. So for me, I'm like, man, I want to be a business owner. I want that. I don't want what I have. I want what my grandpa has. So I was always interested in business from a very young age.
Did he um, teach you a lot about business? How did he interact with you and help?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is really by example. You know,
Hmm.
I like nice things. He liked nice things. He brought us to nice restaurants. He brought me to Disneyland, like, when I was like 9 years old, and never really been on a vacation before that, and not long, haven't been on any vacations really after that for a long time. He would buy like a new Lincoln Town Car every couple of years. So it's just again, just kind of seeing the lifestyle, the lifestyle that you get to live, and then watching TV. There's some shows that I like that they're business owners and stuff. So he didn't talk to me too much about business, and he talked to me about like one thing about grandpa, he was a perfectionist. He was just anything he did, he's just going to do it really, really well. Attention to detail, and a lot of those things, which I definitely see how important that stuff is now. Maybe I didn't understand as much
Hmm.
as a kid, right? You're like, oh, you're spending too much time doing this or that, but I definitely sees that way. That's why he was successful.
So, did was he aware that you had a drug addiction?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I hit it for most of my life, but after a while,
Yeah.
it's pretty apparent to the people close to you. The thing is with the addict, and I have a lot of friends that are recovering addicts as well, and we talk about this, and it's like we think that no one knows, and then we get clean, and we're like, man, everyone knew. It's like, how
Yeah.
the heck do we? Why did we think no one knew that we were messed up all the time?
Yeah. Well, so I hear what you're saying, and yep, it's amazing how much people observe, although they may or may not say something about it. After your almost 2 years of college got you an associate's degree, did you do any college after that?
No, I didn't. No, my thing. I wasn't great in school. I didn't like reading much. I enjoy reading now, but to
Yeah.
me, I was more of a like, let me figure this out. A great example is I was out of work because actually my addiction. I got fired from a career job that I had, and I needed something. So my buddy's like, hey, I get you a job working with a landscaper. I'm like, all right, well, I've never done that before. I guess that, anyone could do that. So I was working with a landscaper. And if you've never done it before, you're going to be slow compared to what they're used to. And very important when you're a business owner, time's the money, and it's super
Yeah.
important. And he let me go pretty fast within like a week or two. I just wasn't experienced enough. And I was like, well, I guess I'll start my own landscape company, right? And I went and bought, the trailer, I bought the lawnmower, I bought everything I needed. One of my friends was he had a successful landscaping business. Talked to him a little bit. He said he'll coach me on some things, and started put an ad in the yellow pages, and started going to work. So I was that kind of person where I rather just try to figure this out and make it happen versus go to school. Knowing what I know now I'm in I'm 45, right? So like now I'm like, man, I wish the times that I was younger, that I was going to school, is definitely wish I took took it more serious, right? Because it's not so much that I believe in school more. I believe in utilizing your time better. So like, when I was in high school, just not paying attention and just guessing to get by on tests and stuff. It's like I'm there for majority of the day, so I might as well took the time to learn the things while I was there.
Yeah. Well, it's all about learning. And obviously, at some point, that mindset sort of kicked into you, and you decided that you really did need to learn and and take that approach a little bit more, which makes a lot of sense, of course.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's wisdom, right? It's just as you get older, you start learning,
Yeah.
and I think as I've become more successful as a business owner, you start looking back and you're like, all right, why am I successful as a business owner? Like, what did I do? And really, it's I got more information, and then I actually utilized the information I got. Like that's really what it is, you know. And then as I try to figure out how to scale my business further and have more success, it's just like how do I find more information that I'm not doing, you know, and you know, put that into good use.
Well, you mentioned that you went to a meeting in 2013, and among other things, that caused you to decide to clean up your act, if you will, get a clean life and get rid of addiction and so on. What was the main thing that caused you to take the leap and go out of the lifestyle that you had into um, what I'm sure you would now acknowledge is a much more productive lifestyle and not have addiction and so on?
Yeah, so you know the crazy thing is, you know, you're taking me back, right? I'm
Yeah,
thinking about some like memories and where I was at, and like ultimately, it's the mindset I was in. You know, ego is such a tough thing. You know, a lot
yeah,
of times people talk about ego and they think like ego means like, oh, I think I'm better than you, or I dress better than you, or whatever. But for me, like ego is like the inability to learn from somebody else. Like that is where ego really hurts you. And you know, I use drugs for majority of my life. Well, I guess not the majority anymore, but for a while it was the majority of my life. I'm almost 20 years. And you know, I always felt like I was in control. Like I could quit if I want, I could stop what I want, right? I don't
hmm,
need to ask for help. You know, growing up with my mom in addiction, she was in the 12-step program, right? She was in those rooms. I was in those rooms as a kid. So I knew all about them and I was like, man, those people are weak-minded. They can't help me. They need it. I don't need this. Like these are the thoughts that just go through your head, right? When your head's sitting there and
yeah,
telling you these things. And when I was in Louisiana, you know, same thing. I was going to figure this out myself. I didn't realize. So my drug of choice was heroin, and for me, like I thought that was the problem. What I didn't realize it was all of them were the problem, right? Which included alcohol, like anything that was going to change the way my mood is, my response to things, right? Is the problem because you know right now you put drugs in front of me, like my mind's straight. It's like really simple for me to be like, no, that's bad, you know, have a few beers and you put something in front of me, it's like, oh wait, that might sound like a good idea, right? My thinking changes
yeah.
when I put a substance in me, so I can't have any substances in me. So I was dating a girl, the girl that drove me from New Jersey to Louisiana. We were together in Louisiana, and she kept like stealing from my family. And I was like, "Holy crap, dude! Why do you steal?" Like, I wasn't the kind of addict that stole from people.
Yeah.
I'm like, why do you keep stealing? Like, stop it." I was like, maybe if we bring you to the 12-step meeting, they can help you. So we took a taxi. I didn't even have a car. The car we got there was broke. So we took a taxi. So in my head, I was just going as a supporter. I was going to help this girl. This wasn't for me at all. This was so this girl would stop stealing from my family. That was the goal and the plan. And she's like, well, you know, some of these meetings are closed and you have to be an addict to get in. They won't let you in. I'm like, well, I got my badges. Don't worry, they're gonna let me in. And I'm sitting in the meeting, and all of a sudden I'm just overwhelmed with emotion. I just start crying.
Hmm.
And I don't know why I'm crying at the time. I'm like, what the heck is going on? Why am I crying? Why am I feeling all this? I know now, you know, it was definitely, you know, a God thing, a spiritual thing, whatever someone's beliefs are, but I don't think it was I think it was, you know, me realizing I was in that right place and actually feeling something that was going to keep me there. And I was like, all right, okay. And then, you know, while I'm in this meeting, I'm receptive now and I'm listening, and they would say certain things. Like one was like, oh, if you're new, you should do 90 meetings in 90 days. I'm like, okay, 90 meetings in 90 days. That sounds good, right? And then the ego kicks in. I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to show my girlfriend that I could do 90 meetings in 90 days and tell her she should do it too. So it again, I'm still trying to help her, right? So I made the commitment to do it. She didn't do it. She went to jail a bunch of times afterwards. And I stayed clean. I did the 90
Hmm.
meetings in 90 days and I stayed clean. So it wasn't even a planned thing. It was literally, and again, I look at like that was God knowing exactly what needed to happen for me to get me to do what needed to be done for me to be clean.
But you did get clean, and I think the ultimate thing I guess I would say is that you you had a perspective that you allowed to be created, and you grew, and um, So no longer was being driven by substances, it was really being driven by you and your will and your mind.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, then that's the first step, getting clean, stop putting substances in your body, and then after that, it was, how do I like I got that figured out now, and it took some time before I
Yeah.
would say I got that figured out. Then it was like, well, what's the next steps?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the next things I could do to better myself?
Well, there's always chocolate, but that's another story. But no, seriously, I appreciate what you're saying. So, what did you do after you got clean? So, you said that was in 2013. So, what
Yeah,
did you
so
do then?
yeah, so throughout my addiction, what would happen is I would typically have my dream job, which what I thought was my dream job, and I would get fired because I just everyone knew I used in my industry. I was just a really good worker, and like I said, I wasn't I wasn't stealing things from people. Like things just looked pretty normal in my life. But then after lose the job, I'm like, all right, I need to get clean. Like I need to get clean. Like I'm just, I was taking too much. Like I went to work just too messed up for him.
And what were you doing? What kind of work?
I worked in the oil business,
Okay,
and in like inspection. So I managed the inspectors that went out in the field and quantified and qualified like the ships and the barges and the shore tanks. Um, Sort of like, oil companies like
got it.
BP and Hess and so so that would happen, and then I would detox. I would get clean for a little bit, right? And then I would get a better job, making more money, and then like that cycle would keep going. So this time in Louisiana, I was like, all right, I'm not gonna work, like, because every that would happen. Like as soon as I have money, life's good. I'm like, I could use it again. I was like, I'm gonna spend some time and really work on myself and figure out what the heck's going on. So I took about a year off of working, and then it was time to go to work, right? I was broke.
Yeah.
So I definitely had to go to work. I was bumming cigarettes from people, sleeping on people's couches. I was clean, but I didn't have a car. I was still broke. I was, negative net worth. And I was like, all right, I need a job, and I started talking to the people in the program, and this guy Jason, he's like, yeah, I can get you a job offshore because I was in Louisiana. They got a lot of people that working offshore, and that's a good way to make some money. And I was looking to make some money. And he's like, but cleaning toilets as a galley hand, basically cleaning toilets,
Mm,
washing dishes, and mopping floors, for minimum wage, 7.25 an hour. And I've only worked minimum wage as a teenager before that. I mean, my last job before that was like $70,000 a year salary. But it didn't matter. I was like, all right, yeah, I'll take it. Because I knew like once I started at one place, I would get to that next level. Like I just had to get started. And that was it. So I was out there cleaning the floors, cleaning the toilets, washing dishes. And I was like, all right, this is the next step. Uh, and quit smoking. I was about 9 months clean. I quit smoking. When I was working offshore, I was overweight, not healthy at all, not doing any kind of exercise. And I was just like, all right, well, I guess got to work on that. And made a goal. I'm going to walk 30 minutes a day on like a treadmill. They had a treadmill up there over there. And then I was eating anything, right? So I'm like, all right, well, maybe I'll stop drinking soda. And I was just looking for like just small, simple, easy things I knew I can do, because I think a lot of times in my life, I'm like, all right, well, let me get healthy. So I'm going to start running 5 miles a day. And we don't work that way, right? And I learned that. So I learned it's just like, let me find this like a small thing I can accomplish.
but you intuitively at least seem to know the things you needed to do to better your life and your body, um, which I'm sure are the kinds of things that you learned over time, associating with people, of course, with the 12-step program and all that. So you knew what you needed to do, but you made the commitment and you established the mindset to do it.
Yeah, and the goal was to make the commitment small enough I could almost definitely do it. Like that was the goal because I was a pretty good wrestler. I did scholarships, go to college. so for me, like making my goal walk 30 minutes on a treadmill was a super small goal, but it just had to be like something so simple, and
Hmm.
that's what I try to teach people now. Like people will come to me like, I got a goal to do this, and like this huge thing. I'm like, well, let's start with something that you'll do, right? Because a lot of times people will tell me these great goals they have, but then they don't actually follow through with them. So like
Hmm.
I want to bring them back to earth and find something that they can actually do, and then we can work up to that big goal. I don't want them to give up on it, right? I have now I'm way more fit now, and eating better. I just kept adding onto that. I just kept building onto that.
Well, giving up smoking had to be a pretty big thing to do. How did you do that?
So there's I've been a pretty spiritual person since I got clean. Um, and it's a crazy story. I wouldn't believe it if someone else told me this, but I'm gonna tell it anyway. I was trying to quit. I was smoking like 2 packs a day, and I wanted to quit. I didn't know how. Again, same thing. And one day I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna get on my knees and pray. And I got on my knees and I said,
Mm.
God, will you please take the desire to smoke away from me? And that was the last time I smoked. Now, it didn't work that magically well. Like I still had the urge to smoke after that, but I would just every time I did, I was just like, no, God's got this. God's got this. God's got
Hmm.
this. And it just got easier and easier and easier. So there's I say there's two real times where I like got on my knees in like pain as an adult and prayed. And one was to stop smoking, and the second one was for patience. Being an entrepreneur, you always want things to happen faster than they are, and it causes a lot of anxiety, right? It causes a lot of like these negative emotional feelings, and I'm like, man, what the heck is going on? And then I finally like stopped, and I realized I was like, oh, I'm just not being patient. I want to be like way further along than I am, but like it's not unrealistic what I want. And I realized like it was lack of patience was causing me a lot of pain. So I
Mm.
got on my knees second time as an adult to really get that fixed.
So I think one of the lessons I'm hearing here is although you did get clean and others can do that, it is a process. It doesn't magically necessarily happen overnight, but it's also a process where you had to create and set the mindset that said you're going to do it. And then you had the mental strength to follow through on that.
Yeah, I mean I actually teach a mindset course for somebody every 5 weeks. They do it in a series that they do, and yeah, I mean, mindset is the most, it's super important. Everything starts with your mindset.
Hmm.
And a great mindset could help you do great things, and a bad mindset could, help you really fall apart.
Yeah.
But yeah, just really being really clear on what it is that you want to do, understanding, right? Like, when I asked God to remove the desire to smoke, I didn't like magically think like that was it. I wouldn't have to like think about it again. It's just realizing like, all right, cool, I'm probably still gonna think about it, but let me keep putting it in God's hands. And then same with like staying clean. Like, I walked into a meeting in 2013, but like I end up going to at least one meeting a day for the first year. So there was a lot of work. So it was like, knowing what it is that you want, coming up with an action plan, but then also understanding that like things aren't going to go as planned either, and not quitting through that.
Yeah. Do you still go to meetings?
I don't currently. So I do a lot of self-development.
Okay.
When you're in a 12-step program, they basically the word is, if you stop going to meetings, you're going to use, and my thought process on that is a 12-step program is a self-help program. That's really what it is. And
Right.
I feel like as long as I'm continuing to doing things to better myself, I continue to grow spiritually and in different ways. Like, to me, like using any substance, it wouldn't even make sense in my lifestyle. Like I go to sleep at 8 o'clock. Like that would
Sure.
definitely interfere with me going to sleep at 8 o'clock. Uh, you know, I'm trying to slow down the rate of aging so that wouldn't coincide with my goals. But I definitely see a lot of people relapse, and typically the thing I hear is, they stop growing, they stop doing things, they just start existing, and I feel like that's just a really bad place or hard place to be for an addict.
Well, I think for anyone, because I think we're here to learn. We should learn, and we should continue to learn, and we should continue to grow. When we stop doing that, then we've lost all perspective on how to improve us and other people, because learning is a part of what we always do.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I was talking to one of my agents, and she told me she was in a funk, and the conversation ended. And I'm like thinking, so I'm always like, all right, cool. How do I help this person? What's the next step? And I was like, you know what? I bet you she's not reading. So I sent her a text message like, hey, are you reading? Have you been reading? And she hasn't. And I was like, well, and I always like to bring things back to myself. I was like, I know
Yeah.
for me, I was like, when I'm learning, I'm never in a funk.
Hmm.
Like when I'm learning, like I think it's impossible to be in a funk while you're learning. Like you said, like when you're not growing and learning, like you're just existing, and when you're existing, then you're in a funk.
Even if you're reading fiction, I learn a lot from reading fiction, because the people who are creating it are exactly that. They're creating it, and it may not be a factual thing based on what we consider facts, but a lot of people who even write fiction are writing very creative things that are very thought provoking, and we should take those into account as well.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%.
Yeah, I think that's very important. So what work did you go into after you got yourself all clean between 2013 and 2017? And we'll get to that. But what did you do for those 4 years?
Working offshore, like I said, as a galley hand. While I was off there, I was paying attention to see what other jobs I could get. And it looked like being in the safety department was a really good job. So the safety, one, they don't get dirty, and then the other thing is the pay was really really good. So I ended up applying for a job in safety. I moved into that department. And then the job I was on, it was 14 days on, 14 days off. And that's
Mm,
one of the reasons why I want to work offshore, because like working for a month and being off for a month. So and that one was 14 days on, 14 days off. But I'm trying to catch up with my life. So for me, like having 14 days off, I'm like, I got to do something with this time.
yeah.
So actually ran into I was at a car dealership, and this lady came in collecting a check, and I'm like, is this the repo people? They look like the repo people. So I started talking to her, and sure enough, she was the repo people. And I was like, what do you guys ever hire people part-time? And they're like, yeah, we're always looking for good people. I was like, I do this offshore. Can you make this work? And she's like, yeah, yeah, definitely. So I'm training up, and this is going to be my first full commission job. I've
Hmm.
never worked fully commission. I worked as a delivery driver, right? Where you get tips, but like never fully commission. And so they're training me, and during the training, right when I'm about to get ready, the oil economy collapses in
Mm,
Louisiana.
yeah.
A lot of people are laid off. It's to me, it was like such a spiritual path, because it was just like everything just happened in line exactly how it should. Because if I didn't talk to this lady, I would had no work again and not know what to do. And now I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'll be a full-time repo person. And at that time, I was making more money than I've ever made before, working 100% commission.
Mm,
And it really showed me that commission would, because to me, everyone's scared of commission, or, oh, I can't count on commission, or, I can't afford commission. And to me, I was like, man, this is way better. I'm a hard worker, I'm an efficient worker. So it just made sense. So now I'm repoing cars for a living in Louisiana. And in 2016, they had a flood. They had a huge rainstorm, and over 200,000 houses got flooded, and tons of cars got flooded. So now I'm pulling into neighborhoods looking for cars, and they're they're all missing, right? All the houses are gutted. I'm like, oh wow, I'm not going to be able to find anyone's car because no one's car is where it's supposed to be now.
Yeah.
So I was like, man, I got to make a drastic change. So I'm like, what the heck am I going to do now? And I was like, well, these houses need to be rebuilt. So
But you were thinking about that. And so it wasn't like you were just reacting. You were pondering, where do we go from here, essentially?
yeah, yeah, no, I mean that was it. I was still, going through the motions because repo trying to find cars was the best thing I had.
Hmm.
Uh, but meanwhile going into all these neighborhoods and just seeing all these houses,
Right.
gutted in their front, all their belongings outside. I'm like, man, these people all need help. Like it was a new problem to solve, basically.
Right. So what'd you do?
So I was like, all right, well, I don't know much about construction. These houses do need to be fixed. I do have a friend in New Jersey that owns a construction company. I called him up. I was like, hey, if I get some houses that need to be rebuilt, would you come here and rebuild them? He said, yes. So I was like, all right, well, now I need to know how to do estimates. And that I didn't know either. So I reached out to my other friend who did estimates and he was out of work. So I'm like, hey, want to start a company? We'll do 50-50 partners. And he said, yeah, let's do it. So I was just knocking on doors all day long, doing free estimates. Did over 100 estimates and finally got a call and went and met the person. They had two houses and they want us to rebuild both the houses. They cut us a check for $80,000. At that time, I didn't own a hammer. I didn't own one tool. I was driving like an old Nissan Altima with like 200,000 plus miles on it. That was financing that I bought for like 1,600 bucks. Dead broke. And, we went into business. And from there, we just kept getting more and more jobs. We were 8 months in, we were invoiced over $800,000. And then I noticed my partner, which was my roommate, seemed like he was doing drugs and
Mm.
he was doing it with the employees. So now I'm like, oh man, what do I do now? So I had to make a decision, and I actually walked away from that business. I walked into the licensing department, took my name off the license, took my name off everything, and just handed it over to him because we were 50-50 partners. I had no control over the business over him. I mean, that was like my first business mistake I've made is bringing someone in as a 50-50 partner. So now when I bring partners in, I make sure I'm always 51%, just to make sure that, if something happens, I have the control over it.
Right. Right. Well, so what year was that? That was what, 2016, 2017?
Yeah,
Yeah.
2016, 2017.
And then by 2018, you started moving into insurance. Why insurance?
Yeah, so after I walked from that, I really had no plan. I mean, I literally walked from it. The home that I lived in was a condo that we were renting that the company was paying for. I didn't have anything, and I ended up catching a job working in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria for 7 months,
Mm.
doing disaster work. So that was good. And before that, I was looking for a business opportunity. I was like, all right, I'm in my 30s now. Nothing's I've done up to this point is going to give me the life that I really wanted. I need to find like the right vehicle and just go all in. And for that vehicle to be right, it has to let me do what I want, where I want, with whoever I want. And I was living in Louisiana and I miss being by the beach. I grew up by the beach. So I'm like, I want to move to Florida. So I need something that's going to let me live in Florida. And I was just looking at calling all my friends that are business owners and just talking to any successful person I can and just trying to get some advice. And somebody led me to insurance. And I heard insurance is a great business to be in. I didn't know a lot about it. I thought you needed like a degree to sell insurance. I didn't realize most states you could just take a 20-hour course and,
And pass
you
a
know,
test.
yes, take a 20-hour course and pass the test. And I didn't realize it was that easy. Wanted to find out how they found their people, like how are you selling people. So like when I repoed cars, I did real well because the company I worked with would send me so many cars to find. There's no way I would have found them all. So I always had work to do. I always had cars to look for. When I was in construction, I was really successful because so many houses were flooded. the local population couldn't handle all the work. People had to come in from different states to do it. So if I was going to sell insurance, I want something similar. I wanted more people looking for the product than was currently being served. I didn't want to like have to like talk to friends and family and set up tents at Walmart and flea markets. I wanted to make sure there was some kind of system where I could talk to people already interested in insurance, and they had that system. So I got my license and got really uncomfortable for some time and built a business.
Why do you think, since um, it probably somewhat goes without saying, but ever since 2018, you've been in the insurance world. What what is it that really made it click for you? Why did it click, and why have you been successful? And we'll obviously talk more about that, but why have you been so successful when so many others have a problem with it and don't make a success out of it?
Yeah, they there's some statistics, right? They say 92% of agents won't make it. And from my experience, I hired over 5,000 agents since I've had my license, and majority of people don't actually do what they're supposed to do. Majority of people don't even do what they say they're going to do. Right? So big mindset issue, really, if you really want to break it down. So that's why most people don't have success. So my first 6 months, I wasn't really having the success I wanted. Matter of fact, I remember saying to myself, man, I would have made more money working this many hours at time and a half at McDonald's. And thought about quitting since 6 months in. So Hurricane Michael hit the panhandle. And I was like, man, I could go there and make a ton of money. I got contractors calling me. I knew disaster work inside and out. And I was just like, it's only been 6 months. I can't really say I learned anything, or I can't really say I tried anything in 6 months. Like if I do something for 6 months and I quit, I can't really say like it worked or not, because I don't feel like 6 months is a long enough sample size, right? If I was like, hey, I'm gonna learn how to play the guitar, and then I just quit after 6 months, like I just feel like you can't proficiently really learn how to play the guitar within 6 months. So I decided to keep going, and things started getting better, and things started getting better, and as they get better, like the your belief increases, and then as your belief increases, you try harder, and as you try harder, things get better, and it's just like this onward upward spiral instead of a downward spiral. But yeah, most people, their activity is so inconsistent. They'll do what they're supposed to do for like a week, and then they don't feel like they got the results. So then they don't do it for the following week, and then maybe the next week they do something, and then the next week they don't. I always compare it to like going to the ocean when the water's cold, and just kind of being in like that little spot where the water's right there by your hips, and you're like half in, halfway out, and it's like the most uncomfortable spot to be in. And that's where most people hang out most of their lives.
Yeah. Rather than jumping all the way in and realizing you can get used to it and enjoy it.
Yes, and it's way faster to get used to it.
Yeah. We had a guest near the beginning of Unstoppable Mindset who loved to swim in the ocean out here in Southern California. He swam without a wetsuit. He did it all year long. And I asked him about what happened when he first started doing it in the winter. And he said, well, he said, I just decided I was going to do it. But he said, as I moved closer to the ocean, I started moving slower. And he said, I realized I was moving slower. And he said, I just had to decide to overcome the fear and jump in. He said, I jumped in a couple of seconds. I was used to the water. He said, I've been doing it ever since. He's even swum nose to nose with a dolphin. And he has been very successful at swimming in the winter as well as in the summer because he got used to it.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing what we can get used to. I mean, we're set to adapt, right? I mean, we humans can adapt to so many different things. But a lot of times we let our mind really stop us from so many different things.
So in 2018 is when you started the price group IMO.
So actually, I started working with an insurance carrier in 2018.
Okay.
And I just had an agency at that time, and I did that till 2023.
Ah,
And the things weren't the same there anymore, just to politely
yeah.
say it. and the agents weren't happy anymore. They changed comp plans, they changed the way they did a lot of different things, and it was becoming a really hard place for an agent to be successful and make money. So I decided to add some rated carriers, right? Add some other insurance carriers to work with. Um, and when I did that and they found out, they actually canceled my contracts. So I went from making six figures monthly to nothing. Just in one day. Just in one day it just happened, where my pay just completely got shut off. And that is when I started the price group, the IMO, and that was I think 351 days ago. And the reason I know that is yesterday was day 350, and we hit $10 million in production in 350 days, which blows my mind. So
Well, since I promised we would do it, IMO stands for
yes, independent marketing organization. So basically, what the IMO is it's the buffer between the insurance carriers, something like Transamerica, Mutual of Omaha, American General. They don't want to deal with just every agent that wants to be
right.
an agent. So they contract the IMO, and then the IMO will contract the agents or smaller agencies. So it's really just a middleman. So you don't have a large insurance company just dealing with somebody that just got their license.
Well, you said that when you were discontinued by the insurance agency, you said you were making like six figures a year. What kind of habits did you develop that took you to that within 2 or 3 years so that you were actually making and became a millionaire because of all of that?
Yeah, it was at six figures monthly.
Right,
Yeah, six
right.
figures monthly. They shut off, and yeah, it's trying to. I mean, there's so many habits, but the biggest thing I see that I do different versus other people, um, is I don't pay attention to the scoreboard. Where somebody might be like, "Oh man, I just made more money than I've ever made before in a week or a month or a day," and then they immediately like take off the next day or like go on vacation or they're celebrating. Like my celebration is like, "Oh, look at that!" Like for instance, I told you, 2 days ago, I just noticed we did $10 million in production since we started. Did over like 1,000 or over 10,000 policies, right? 10,000 families. We helped, and I was like, all right, cool. Like nothing changed. Like I still went to work that day. I end up working, till late. So it's just a matter of like really continue to continue to put the effort in, regardless of what the results are. And then some people might look at that and be like, "Well, that's crazy. Why does this guy work so much?" And then it's really like trying to see what's possible. What you can do. I was always thought like once I would be in a spot where I'm at now, I'd probably spend a lot of time on the beach and do nothing. But sitting on the beach and doing nothing bores me, right? I mean, I could do it for a little bit, but it's like, entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs like solving puzzles, solving problems, and doing things. And that's what I enjoy on a daily basis.
Yeah. And it's part of the habit, it's part of the mindset. And if suddenly you started seeing a change and something wasn't working, what would you do? So if suddenly your income started to go down, you would certainly notice it. What would you do?
Yeah, so the first thing is you look at the numbers, right? Even not just go down, like, typically it's always going up. So even if it's flat, right? I remember in 2000, I think it was 2020 and 2021. At the end of 2021, I looked at the production at the end of the year and it was almost the same as 2020. I'm like, wait, how did that happen? Like, why didn't I grow? Because I grew very fast all the years previous, by huge percentages. I was like, what happened? Why was there so little growth? So I'm like, all right, let me look at that. And then I realized we spent the same amount of money for marketing, like the same exact dollars for marketing, basically from the previous year. So that's why there was no growth. So when things start changing, you want to look at metrics. So I'm always looking at I always try to find different metrics to look at. How many agents are we hiring? How many policies are we writing? How many
Right.
leads are we getting out? What's the closing ratio on the lead? So I'm tracking all these metrics every single month. So that way I'm looking at and improving them. So that way, if there is a problem, we could hopefully catch it sooner than later.
Well, and that really was my point in asking the question. You go think about it and you look at what's going on because you know what works. And You will figure out what isn't working, and then you will adapt and do what you need to do to change it so that you can continue to be successful. But it doesn't sound like, as you said, you're keeping score. You're doing it because you love the work that you do. And I know you've done over $50 million in sales and helped thousands of families and so on. What's the real secret that caused you to be able to have such rapid growth?
Rigorous honesty. The to be able to do, $50 million and help 50,000 clients, it takes a huge team, right? It's not me. I can't do that by myself. And, to build a huge team, you need a good culture, and to have a good culture, you need to be someone that people want to follow, people that they look up to, and people that they trust. And a lot of times, newer agency owners will come up to me and they'll ask, like, what's the best piece of advice you give me? And I was like, just always be honest. Like, you can lie to somebody, you could fool them for a little bit, but eventually they'll figure it out. And then you lost that person's trust. Because if I could get, if somebody's, let's say someone's watching this and they're like, you know what, I want to sell insurance. And they have no experience at all. And if I could get them to, like, really, really trust me and just be really coachable and do everything that they're supposed to do, like, they'll be successful.
Yeah.
But if they catch me lying to them, they're not going to be as coachable. And then I have a harder time helping them be successful. So I think it's just really important to just always be as honest as you can, even if they don't like it. Just
Yeah.
be as honest as you can.
I I talk a lot about using guide dogs since I've been using guide dogs since I was 14. And I talk about the fact that dogs may love unconditionally, and I think that's true unless there's something that's really damaged them, but they don't trust unconditionally. But the difference between dogs and people, by and large, is that dogs are open to trust. And it is a two-way process. They are looking for someone to be the team leader, but they're also looking for someone who they can follow and who they can trust and not be afraid of, and who they know intuitively is going to support them. And I think that's just as true in in any kind of business that we as human beings deal with. And it is all about trust. I think that's the most important thing that we can bring into business is developing a sense of trust. And I've met with customers when I was selling products, and I would learn as much as I could about what they're looking for, why they're looking for what they're looking for, what they expect to do with it. And there have been times that the products that I had would not do what the customer wanted. And although I'm sure that some of my bosses would have hated it if they were there to hear it, I would tell the customer that this won't work and here's why. But here's also what will work. Invariably, by gaining that trust, what I've discovered is that in the long run, there will be greater rewards, and the customers who learn to trust me and who learn from my knowledge will reciprocate in the future. And I think that is so true. Trust has got to be the one of the well, if not the most significant thing that any of us bring into business. And clearly, you've done that, and clearly, that's what you promote. You've done, as you said, in less than 350 days, you've done over $10 million in sales, and that says a lot. That there's a lot of trust there somewhere, and it's not just your team, although that's a part of it. It's also the people that they all work with, whose trust they've developed.
Absolutely. It's like, it's a way more valuable currency than money.
Yeah.
It's so much more valuable.
And I would assume if I asked you are or what lessons should other entrepreneurs learn from all of this, trust would certainly be one of them. Do you have other things that you think that entrepreneurs really need to learn and take to heart?
Yeah, I think the other thing is, if you plan on being an entrepreneur and you're not having success yet, um, you got to go all in, and you got to go all in on one thing. What I see a lot of people do is they want to have seven different businesses at once, and you're spreading your focus thin
Yeah.
instead of, like, putting your focus on one thing. You'll be so think about it, there's so many very, very successful people with just one business.
Right.
And that's a big thing I see now, once you have a business and it's on autopilot and, and then it's okay to diversify, people are like, well, millionaires have, multiple businesses and multiple streams of income, but I'm willing to bet the majority of them, made their money with one and then
Hmm.
diversified.
Yeah. Yeah. Or not. But they may very well have diversified um, and gone off to develop other teams and create other businesses that they've made successful, which makes a lot of sense. Can you give us a success story of someone within your team um, who you are inspired by, who has been very successful, and you've helped so many people? What's a story where somebody within your team has inspired you because of what they did?
Yeah, we got a bunch of cool stories and always get some new ones. One that pops in my head when you say is Dana. Dana got her license. So Dana reached out to me. We actually grew up in the same town. We used together. She got clean before me. And she messaged me on Facebook. I didn't like know where. And she's like, Dave, I don't know what you're doing, but I want to do it too. Just from some Facebook post she's seen. So I didn't even bother giving her any more information. I just sent her the link that you need to sign up for the insurance course. She told me she wanted to do it. So I figured she had all the information she needed. So I sent her the link. She quickly gets her license, and she was like super introverted, no real sales experience, very shy, very timid, and probably the worst example of somebody that would be successful. Back then, that's when we went out to people's houses to sell insurance. So probably the least chance to be successful. And she sucked. She sucked for like 2 years. Like she's my best example of somebody that just didn't get it for a long time. And she was a retail worker before this, so she worked in like the stores in the mall, right? So she
Hmm.
had no experience, single mom, basically just like, listen, this isn't going to cut it for how I want my daughter to live. And but she still went to work every day. So there's a lot of times I'll meet an agent, be like, oh, I've been an agent for 4 years, but like they didn't go to work every day for 4 years, right? They had a license for 4 years, but they didn't go to work every day. She went to work every day for 2 years, and all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, man, she just started having success as an agent. And what was really cool with her is because she went through so much struggle and became so successful as an agent, she was able to be able to help other people go through the same thing. So now she's actually the biggest agency in my IMO. She did almost $400,000 in production last month.
Mm.
She leads a team of amazing people. She has other single moms on her team, and she's just crushing it. She lives in a high rise in Miami, like her daughter wants for nothing. She's does jujitsu and whatever. Like her daughter does jujitsu. She's like this little cute little 6-year-old thing running around beating up boys in a gi. But it's just cool. It's just so inspiring to like watch that because it didn't come easy for her.
Yeah.
And she just kept fighting. And I think she's gonna be so much more successful than she is. She's already super successful, but I feel like she still has so much more potential. And it's just really it's great to watch. It's to me like, you know, I was always short on money my whole life, right? Money was always a big factor, and now it's not. So now it's like the currency that I get paid in is success stories, and that's what really drives me.
And I bet that if we were to ask her if she really appreciates where she came from and what she's done and where she's going, she would say absolutely, because she has clearly had to think about it. And that mindset, that thing we call an unstoppable mindset, is what really kicked in for her, which is so cool.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it was amazing. Yeah, unstoppable is the exact word for her.
Well, if there's someone who's listening or watching us today who's stuck and who's kind of in a dead end job or whatever, what would you say is the first mindset shift they need to make to move forward?
And the first thing is be open minded. I remember having so many different jobs throughout my life, and just like accepting it, right? Just like, oh, this is my job, this is my dream job. You start like rationalizing it and just being open-minded to something else may suit you better, and a lot of times people get really caught up on the vehicle and, instead of the destination. If
Yeah.
someone was like, "Hey, David, you could live on a beach and, make $1 million a year selling volleyballs, and have a lot of free time and freedom to do what you want." I'm like, "All right, well, I'm a volleyball salesman then." So as long as it's legal and moral, the thing to get the lifestyle, isn't doesn't mean too much, because ultimately, you want that to open up freedom. I don't, um, I don't spend my life's a lot more than just insurance at this point.
Yeah. That's stuff. Even selling insurance is stuff. It's the mindset, it's your mind, it is the the whole world that you've developed inside and outside of you that really makes the difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. What's the biggest mistake you see that people make when they're trying to start a business or they're doing a business?
They completely underestimate the amount of effort that needs to go into it. They want to wing it. They want to do it part-time. They Another big one is they don't work hard for themselves. They don't, like, if someone's at their job and their mother-in-law is like, "Hey, can you pick up from the airport?" They're like, "No, I'm at my job." But when they're working in their business, they're like, "Yeah, of course I'll pick you up. We'll go to lunch afterwards," right? Like, I would say the best thing about working for yourself, or the work for yourself, good and bad, depending on what your work ethic is. So I think just got to be real clear with, when you're going to work. You got to be real clear with what you're going to do. Make sure you're doing things that are going to create revenue for your business. And then you have to be okay to say no to people. No one, I'm not picking someone up in the airport in the middle of the day. I'll send you an Uber, but there's certain things that need to get done for the business
Hmm.
to run. Especially
And
especially in the beginning. I mean, now obviously I got more freedom, so I can do things like that. But in the beginning, like, I got work to do.
and that's fair. I think that's certainly fair, and that um, you're the one that has to set your boundaries and your priorities. And as long as you're doing it, as you said, for good moral and ethical reasons, then that's what you should do. And I suspect that in general, when you do that, even if somebody needs a ride from the airport, like you said, you could send an Uber, you've got other ways of dealing with it. You'll always make sure that people get what they need. I
Yeah,
would think that
absolutely.
that's the case. Yeah. Well, David, I want to thank you for being here. This has been um, enjoyable, very educational, and I hope that people will learn a lot from it. I have, and I really appreciate your time. And it's getting on toward dinner time for you. It will be fairly soon, but who knows? It depends on how late you work. But I want to thank you for being here, and I want to thank all of you for listening. If people would like to reach out to you, how can they do that?
Yeah, I'm on most social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn as David Price Official. You can also check out our website, tpglife.com, and submit your information, if you want
What's
to
the
talk.
website again?
tpglife.com. And then, yeah, but I,
Okay.
I think, any social media, just feel free to reach out to me, in the direct messages, and be happy to help you any way I can.
Have you written any books yet?
Not yet, not yet. Well, like I told you before, I got one. I need to go through and spend some time editing
Yeah.
it.
Well, you let us know when it's all done. We'll help promote. Thank you all for listening. We appreciate it. We would really value you giving us a 5-star rating wherever you're watching or listening to the podcast. And if you, any of you out there, and David, you as well, if you know of anyone else who you think ought to be a guest on Unstoppable Mindset, we would appreciate an introduction. We're always looking for more folks who have stories to tell us. So we would really appreciate you doing that. But again, David, I just want to thank you for being here and taking the time to be with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity, and it was definitely very pleasurable. Appreciate that.